Hey, and welcome to Finlos Lives. I am recording this after a little bit of a break, and I'm not going to apologize because things happen, interests and levels of energy ebb and flow over time. Part of the reason is I was on a trip, although I had originally written the outline for this episode while I was on that work trip and had fully intended to record this while I was in Nashville for some work, but the situation wasn't right. The recording space wasn't great. I was getting lots of background noise. Also, I just didn't have the energy. I wasn't really feeling up to it. And so it's just been sort of on the back burner. And it leads me actually into the topic of this episode, which I began to prepare for about a month ago, which is the value of routines and our desire to want to break free or break out of those routines. And it seems as if everybody at one point or another, if not most of the time, really wants to break out of the routine or the day in, day out cycle of regularity. And if you think about it, you can probably break down your average day into a set of routines that happen in sequences and then various times of the week. And as you zoom out, you'll see that your routines have their own routines that all they fit into larger cycles. And it's really easy to become overwhelmed by a sense of repetition, redundancy, and ultimately, I guess, the sameness. So we end up examining our time and really push back against the tendency to build patterns or cycles. And there's a couple of reasons why this might come up. We might get a sense of boredom or ennui. We might want to experience new things to get some excitement. Or because we have a fear or an anxiety of falling into a rut or a slump. So I'm not arguing against those feelings because I know that I experience boredom regularly. I know that I crave to do new things and to experience new things. I know that I really do have an ongoing anxiety about falling into a rut or feeling the slump of wanting to do things, but then lacking the direction or the energy or whatever excuse I come up with not to do those things. But I think that boredom is a real and valid warning sign that something is wrong, that a change is needed, that movement is needed, that action is needed. But I also think that boredom is a very modern symptom, one that accompanies another very modern diagnosis, and that's depression. To do a little background for this, because I don't want to be, talking out of my ass here, I did do a little research, and a 2023 NIH or National Institutes of Health study found that the number of incident cases of depression worldwide increased by 49.86%. That's 50%. We'll just round it up. And wealthy countries that have high socio-demographic indices, including and especially the United States, have the greatest increase in diagnosis. So I don't find this surprising. I don't find this surprising at all that developed nations, as we like to call them, wealthy nations, whatever term you want to use, it's always based upon those socio-demographic indices. It's not surprising that the wealthiest countries also have the highest incidences of depression. And now, obviously, not a universal. There are countries that are quote-unquote developed or wealthy that have very low rates of depression, but there are complicating factors with those, such as homogeneity or a singular culture, a singular language, all of these things which sort of play into or make the conversation a little bit more complicated. But generally speaking, wealthy countries have a much higher index or a much higher rate of depression. And this is a relatively new phenomenon. I think it is important to consider this. And there are many paths that lead to depression. And I don't want to simplify any of them. From trauma to injury, life events, or biological causes, many things can potentially lead to experiencing depression in its various forms. But boredom and listlessness and ennui are some of the most common symptoms of depression, and so it would make sense that as people are being diagnosed with depression, they would try to address what could be perceived as the lowest hanging fruit, that sense of boredom, that sense of needing movement, the sense of wanting to change something. I mean, that feels relatively easy to do. Just do something. And to get back to boredom as a modern problem, I think maybe a piece of this is that the activities that we tend to do, they come to us a little too easily. I think for the time that we have, the limited time that we have set aside for play, and work time has become such a large part of our daily lives, for both kids and adults, that time seems to be, or generally, they appear to be dominated by curated experiences, or for the default to be to turn on the phone for the immediate gratification of all the content that we have at our fingertips. But that kind of entertainment, and I use air quotes around entertainment, can only refill us so much. I think that for something to really offer a deep sense of satisfaction, for it to restore us, I think it requires some work to think about, to plan, and then some time for it to occur and to complete. These kinds of experiences are the opposite of immediate gratification. And so let's go back to where I started with routine. I don't think that routine is the problem. I don't think that regularity or predictability are problems. I think that having routines has just become an easy excuse for avoiding the work of being creative. In fact, I think it's routine that allows for the opportunities to plan. Again, at the risk of sounding like back in my day, one of those types of people, I remember having to imagine and to think of the games and to sit and focus and to communicate with friends or with siblings and to take the time to develop how these games were going to flow. They weren't, well, there were board games, but even board games took time. So stay with me here. When I first started teaching, I taught creative writing. And I taught creative writing for quite a while. And this was my dream job for a good long time. And I'm lucky to have had that opportunity. But one of the cornerstones of my creative writing class, and this is not something that I just came up with. This is if you've ever taken a writing course, this is just the backbone of basic writing, is that you have to write every single day. It's usually in the form of journaling, but you have to write every single day. There has to be some routine or program or set schedule that you follow. And that sounds antithetical to the creative process, which we imagine to be boundless and free and liberating and all of these things. But if we want creativity and fun to be parts of our lives, then we have to build a routine for them to exist. So to stick with writing, I taught my students, well, I made my students, we'll be honest about that, I made them write every single day. The first 10 minutes of every single class was a journaling activity, and it would rotate between different types of activities. Sometimes I'd give them prompts, sometimes I'd give them pictures, sometimes I'd play music. But every single day we would write something. And importantly, I would write with them too. So this was actually a really big part of how I maintained my creative process. And of course, when you write in this way, when you create in this sort of perfunctory, rote way, not everything is going to be the best quality. The content is not always going to be your best material. Not even generally what I would consider to be good writing. Journal writing is a place just to let the ideas flow, to get the random firings of your neurons from your brain onto a piece of paper. But those daily writing activities for me and my students, I hope, became where I would look to harvest the ideas that would become my bigger, stronger projects. And so I think if we take this idea and we extrapolate that process, we need the routine for even fun, creative things, because it's the routine that makes it part of our daily life. It's building the routine around having fun and making fun and being creative that allows it to occur with regularity. And I get it. It's really easy for things to feel samey and repetitive, and for things to even maybe feel a little stale. But it's an established process that becomes routine, a routine that has a low barrier to entry, that allows for the ideas to flow without risk, or without a great risk anyways, which allows for good creative practices to take hold. Our lives are busy and complex and complicated, and we have limited time. Our time is dominated usually by work. And so we need to prioritize things like family and quality time. And sometimes it's easy to subordinate the creative practices and the little ways in which we might have fun every day, the play that we really need to make time for. But when I have to find balance, find ways to organize time, that is exactly when routines are essential, because they help me to get and stay organized. They alleviate some of the mental work that goes into just getting started. And getting started, to use the cliche, is really almost always the hardest part. As I think now, I have been sitting on this idea for over a month, wanting to have this conversation with you about what routines in your life look like, how you approach routine, whether you view that routine as a negative. Do you feel bored? Do you feel stuck? Does it feel like you're stuck in a loop? And if you do, I 100% feel that. There are times when I make the mistake of stopping and thinking about what life looks like. The routines and the cycles, the getting up, the washing the dishes, the folding the clothes, the walking the dog, the going to work, the writing the emails, the returning the messages, all of those things that we do every single day that are just so repetitive, right? That we do because we have to make a living, because we're all trying to survive under this machine. We're all stuck in it. But I wonder if we look at the machine and we look at how efficient we become with those routines, instead of, as we gain efficiency, as we gain practice, as we gain experience, we have a tendency to have a little bit more time to then maybe take on more responsibility or take on that extra task or volunteer to do that thing that somebody else could volunteer to do. I wonder if instead of using efficiency in our work to increase our productivity, instead we can use that routine and that efficiency to take some time back. And I'm not saying, wink, wink, to use your work time to play. But what I am saying is reserve some of that mental energy, reserve some of that space, reserve some of that time, reserve some of that energy to plan for yourself, to think about how you're going to use your limited time to do something fun. And whatever fun is for you, it could be as simple as baking, going for a walk, gardening, playing with your pet, hanging out with your kids, reading a book, anything. Just that time is precious. And I think we can use our daily cycles actually to help us to build in those routines for fun. And I think if we think of the routine as a way to build fun back into our lives, that's one way to make the system help us to work for us as we try to survive in that machine. Let me know what you think. That's it for this episode. Thanks for listening. I'd love to hear your comments, questions, or suggestions, and you can reach out to me via social media by emailing finlos@finloslives.com or by going to finloslives.com and leaving a voice message with the SpeakPipe app. I look forward to our next conversation.